He tossed a newborn into the lake. Said it violated some made-up HOA code. Yeah, you heard that right. A guy named Travis Dean, a washed-up ex-security guard, had twisted our quiet neighborhood into his own little kingdom of fear. But what Travis didn't count on was that the baby's father, me, was Nick Carter, a former Navy SEAL with nothing left to lose. And man, you won't believe what happened next, or how justice finally showed up, loud and hard. It all started just after sunrise in Oak Ridge County. The sky had that soft orange glow you get in the early morning, and the dew on the lawns made everything shimmer. The air was still, that rare kind of silence before the world wakes up. Birds rustled in the trees. Sprinklers clicked on here and there, filling the air with a low hum. I was out back by the grill, flipping pancakes with one hand, baby monitor in the other. After 12 years in the SEALs, I had finally traded combat boots for breakfast duty, and honestly, I was good with that. My wife, Rachel, was inside with our newborn son, Mason, who'd finally passed out after a rough night. I was still adjusting to civilian life, cutting grass instead of clearing buildings, flipping pancakes instead of flipping targets. We'd bought the place because the real estate agent had promised it was in a model HOA community. You know, safe, tidy, well-organized. I guess I didn't pay enough attention to the tightly regulated part. The first time I met Travis Dean, the self-appointed HOA officer, I figured he was just one of those guys who never let go of Halloween. He wore this sketchy-looking security outfit, had fake credentials, and strutted around like he was the sheriff of a ghost town. Clipboard in hand like it was a badge, handing out warnings about mailbox colors and sidewalk chalk like they were criminal offenses. I'd seen guys like him before, not always in uniform, but always with that same power-hungry attitude. Control freaks, the kind who unravel when the world doesn't salute them. I never imagined he'd turn into a real threat. That morning, just as I flipped the last pancake, I heard Mason gurgling through the monitor. I smiled, wiped my hands on a towel, and went inside to grab a bottle from the warmer. I couldn't have been gone more than 30 seconds. But that's all it took. Tires screeched. A roar tore through the still morning. Then, metal crunching. I dropped the bottle. My instincts kicked in like muscle memory. I sprinted to the porch and froze. There he was. Travis Dean. Standing at the end of our driveway, next to this beat-up white pickup. Slapped on the door was one of those cheap magnetic signs that read HOA enforcement. His eyes were wide, unblinking. His body jittering like he was wired on something. And in his arms? Mason. Still strapped into his stroller. My heart slammed against my ribs. Code violation. Travis yelled, lifting the stroller like he was holding stolen luggage. What the hell are you doing? I shouted, but he didn't stop. He turned, not toward the street, not toward his truck, but straight toward the lake. I took off after him. Feet pounding over concrete and wet grass. Adrenaline lit up every nerve like fire. I screamed his name again and again, the words slicing my throat. Stop. Put him down. We reached the lake in under 15 seconds. I was maybe 3 strides behind when he skidded to the edge. HOA regulations, he bellowed, his voice cracking. Eyes wild. No unapproved objects left in public view. And then, with both hands, he hurled the stroller into the water. There was a splash. Then, just like that, he disappeared into the fog and trees without a sound. I didn't stop to think. I dove. Everything froze, like the whole world paused to take a breath. That stroller hit the surface of the lake, made one ripple, and then vanished. No splash, no bubbles, just this crushing stillness that felt like it broke the laws of nature. I didn't scream. I didn't yell. I didn't even breathe. I just moved. It wasn't a decision. It was raw instinct, muscle memory from years in the military, sure, but this was different. Deeper. Primal. I launched into the water like a missile, cutting through the cold with one clean dive. It was freezing, but I didn't feel it. What was running through my veins wasn't cold. It was pure terror. My body took over. My brain? It was just along for the ride. All I could see was the outline of the stroller sinking beneath the surface. My eyes burned. My lungs screamed. Each second felt like a weight slamming down on my chest. 1. I kicked hard, pushing down into the murky water. 2. The world above me disappeared. Everything went black except for the pounding in my chest. 3. I saw something. A glint of metal. The stroller's frame, half buried in the muck. 4. I reached out, grabbed hold. It wouldn't budge. 5. I shifted my angle, planted my boots in the soft lake bottom, and pulled with everything I had. 6. It came loose. I wrapped both arms around my boy and kicked toward the light. 7. I broke the surface with a sharp gasp, clinging to Mason's tiny body, his limbs limp in my arms. He wasn't moving. I didn't stop. Staggering through the shallows, I half ran, half swam to the shore, water pouring off me, stinging my eyes, choking my mouth. I laid Mason down on the grass, so gently. He didn't stir. Then, a cough. A twitch. A sudden, gasping cry that sliced through the silence like a knife. It was raw. It was real. It was everything. I dropped to my knees, scooped him back up, pulled him to my chest, wrapping him in my soaked shirt. The crying turned into soft whimpers. Then sobs. And to me, it was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. I held my son like he was life itself, because he was. He was alive. I didn't speak. I didn't move for a long time. I just stared at his tiny chest, rising and falling against mine. Every part of me wanted to cry, to collapse, to thank God or the sky or fate or something, but I didn't, because something inside me had shifted. Something old had come back. I stood up slowly, Mason in one arm. With the other, I pulled off my old Navy-issue field coat, the one I hadn't worn since I left the service, and wrapped it around him. My hands weren't shaking anymore. My breath came steady. And my mind? It had gone crystal clear. This wasn't over. I looked out across the lake, toward the trees, the quiet streets, the shadows. Travis Dean was still out there. Still walking free. I'm going to find him, I said, low and even. There wasn't any rage in my voice. No shouting. Just cold, solid certainty. I kissed Mason's forehead. And in that moment, the man I used to be, the one who left combat behind, was gone. What was left? Something colder. Sharper. Fury, buried under years of discipline. And it wasn't going anywhere. Travis wasn't just some nutjob in a fake badge. He wasn't harmless. Wasn't playing dress-up. He was dangerous. Twisted. This wasn't about neighborhood rules or sidewalk chalk. This was about power. About rejection. About bitterness eating him alive. Years back, he'd been a night guard at some warehouse. Turns out Travis had a history. Not a criminal record, but enough whispers to raise eyebrows. Intimidation, pushing people around, sometimes even getting physical. No charges ever stuck. But everyone who'd worked with him remembered that look in his eyes when they stripped away his authority. It wasn't embarrassment. It was pure, seething rage. After that, he kind of faded from view. Moved into this small camper tucked way back behind the woods, just outside of the city's zoning limits. Technically off the books. And that's where he built his little empire. He called it the HOA Tactical Unit. At first, people thought it was a joke. A creepy one, sure, but still a joke. He started printing fake violation notices. Slipped them into mailboxes like they were parking tickets. Made up nonsense rules like excessive grass density or unauthorized garden gnomes. It was laughable until it wasn't. Then he began showing up. In full uniform. Dark navy coat, combat boots, a knockoff badge clipped to his chest. He'd bang on doors like he was there to make an arrest. Carried a clipboard, a flashlight, a radio. Did everything he could to look official. He started doing fake inspections, prowling at night, shining lights through people's windows. He'd shout about property code violations, warning folks he had escalation authority if they didn't comply. Most neighbors were creeped out, but nobody wanted to confront him. Some figured he wasn't right in the head. Others worried what he'd do if you challenged him. A few people actually gave in, trimming bushes, repainting fences, just to avoid hearing that knock on their door. But when Mason ended up in the lake, everything changed. The silence broke. Whispers turned into stories. Stories turned into something real. Folks started coming forward, cautiously. Not to the cops. Not yet. but to someone they knew would listen. To me. There was Cheryl, who lived near the woods. She said she'd seen Travis standing waist-deep in the lake, in full gear, just weeks before. Like he was running some kind of sick training exercise. Mike, from up on Sycamore, told me he'd seen Travis hauling crates behind a ridge toward a shack no one knew existed. A teenage kid admitted Travis had followed him home one night. Just followed, scribbling something in a notebook every time the boy looked back. And one woman even had proof. A blurry photo from a distance. Travis in someone's backyard, measuring grass with a ruler. And on his hip? Something holstered. None of them had said anything before. But now they needed to be heard. And I listened. Didn't take notes. Didn't ask for dates or details. I just stood there, arms crossed, jaw set, listening as the whole thing started to come into focus. This guy hadn't snapped overnight. He'd been like this. He wasn't pretending anymore. He truly believed he was the law, and the rest of us were just supposed to fall in line. I wasn't gathering evidence. I wasn't building a case. This wasn't for a courtroom. This was for something else. Something quieter. Faster. Justice measured by the only code I'd ever truly believed in. The kind they don't write down. The kind you carry inside you. I found the trailer 2 days later. It was tucked deep behind the ridge, where the woods thicken and the land drops into a forgotten corner past the edge of the neighborhood. The tires were swallowed by weeds. Rust spread across the shell like a sickness. Most folks would have thought it was abandoned. But I saw it, the faint trail through the dirt, the fresh boot prints. And underneath it all, the low hum of a battery-powered generator, steady and alive. I didn't knock. I opened the door, slow and sure, every movement intentional. And what I found inside wasn't a home. It was a shrine. The walls were covered top to bottom in old newspaper clippings. There were printed emails, newspaper scraps, and the faces of our neighbors tacked up like he was solving some twisted crime. Red string connected them all, like a conspiracy theory that had spun way out of control. Maps covered one whole wall, detailed maps of our neighborhood. Every fence line. Every camera angle. He even had notes on gate hinges and mailbox placements. Sticky notes were everywhere. Some had names. Others were scrawled with things like non-compliant, visual threat, repeat offender. And right in the center, on a busted-up piece of plywood lit by a cheap desk lamp, sat a single folder. Thick red letters on the front, blocky and angry. Carter. I froze. Took a breath. Then reached for it. The first page hit me like a gut punch. It was a photo of Mason. Maybe a week old. Shot from a distance, grainy and off-angle, but it was him. Right underneath it, written in jagged red marker, one word. Mutant. My hands clenched around the page. Beneath the photo? So much more. Printouts of my old social media. Service records scraped from public databases. Diagrams of my backyard. Floor plans of our house. Even the serial number from the mailbox I'd installed last month. He had everything. The car I drove. The brand of baby monitor we used. This wasn't about a code violation. This wasn't random. Travis had been watching me. Studying. Planning. This was personal. I kept flipping through the mess. More notes scribbled in that same red ink. Seal threat profile, high. Another one, underlined twice. Weak point equals child. The fire in my chest didn't burn hot anymore. It was cold now. This man hadn't just crossed a line. He'd built an entire damn world on the other side of it. And the creepiest part? He left all of this here. Exposed. Unlocked. Like he wanted it found. Like he was waiting. I scanned the room one last time. Then I saw it, a cracked photo frame nailed to the wall. Black and white. A younger Travis, in what looked like an old security guard uniform. The glass was shattered. Right beneath the photo, written in ink. Order is earned, not given. I stepped back. Turned around. Closed the trailer door behind me. I knew what this was now. It wasn't madness. It was a challenge. And I'd already accepted. The house was quiet when I got back. Rachel and Mason were fast asleep in the back room, warm and safe under the soft buzz of the baby monitor. I moved through the hall like a shadow. No lights. No noise. I didn't even check my phone. I didn't need to. Everything I needed was already burned into my mind, mapped out, piece by piece. I stepped into the study and closed the door behind me. Then I knelt down, reached beneath the bottom shelf of the cabinet, and pressed my thumb into a hidden magnetic panel. The floorboard popped loose. Inside, bolted straight to the foundation, was the lockbox. I entered the code without thinking. My hands knew it better than my brain did. The lid lifted. There was Glock 19. Matte black. Balanced. It had been with me through 3 deployments, coastlines, rooftops, drop zones. And now it waited again. Not for war. Not for revenge. For resolution. I picked it up carefully, ran a cloth across the slide, and chambered around. That sound didn't echo. It just stayed with you. 17 rounds. I checked them one by one. Didn't count with numbers, just with breath. Each click of the mag spring reminded me who I still was. Who I'd always been, underneath the quiet, underneath the pancakes, underneath the polite nods in the driveway. Beneath the baby carrier. Beneath the neighborly smiles and lawn-mower stripes. Beneath the fresh paint on the porch and the flag waving gently in the breeze. I was still him. The guy trained for moments exactly like this. Not fueled by rage. Not driven by panic. Just locked in. Focused. I holstered the Glock and headed to the closet. In the very back, under some old winter coats, I found what I hadn't touched in years. The boots, the ones that didn't make a sound when they moved. The field jacket, heavy, with pockets that remembered how to stay silent. And the cap, pulled low to shade my eyes. I looked in the mirror once. What stared back wasn't a suburban dad. It was the man who knew how to track footsteps in gravel, who could steady his breath under pressure, who ended chaos before it ever spread. I didn't move like someone out for revenge. I moved like a man on a mission. There was no room for doubt. I stepped outside and let the door close softly behind me. The air was cool. So, the trees whispered just enough to remind you they were there. The neighborhood was quiet. Streets empty. But I didn't need directions. I knew where he'd be. Travis Dean wasn't running. Not tonight. Not after leaving a trail that loud, that personal. Guys like him? They don't disappear. They circle back. Back to wherever they last felt in control. I glanced toward the horizon. The lake shimmered under the soft light of the moon. That's where this started. That's where he'd be. I didn't flinch. Didn't mutter a word. I just started walking. And with every step, the act, the normal life, the nice guy mask, peeled away. All that remained was purpose and steel. The fog was thick down by the lake, hugging the ground like it didn't want to let go. The trees stood frozen along the edge, branches stiff and still. The silence wasn't just quiet, it was dense. The kind of quiet you get right before something permanent happens. My boots moved through the grass without a sound. Breath steady. Heart calm. I didn't feel anything anymore. Just clarity. Then I saw him. Just where I figured he'd be. Travis, standing still at the water's edge. Shrouded in the fog. One arm dangled at his side. The other held something tight across his chest, a short-barreled shotgun. I didn't slow down. He turned his head like someone half awake in a dream. "I knew you'd come," he muttered. His voice was dry, cracked, like he hadn't spoken in hours. "Took you longer than I expected." I stopped about 30 feet away. Still silent. He smiled, faint and broken, his face twitching like cracked glass. "You think you're the judge?" he said. "I did what your precious Ija was too scared to do. I brought order." I didn't blink. Then, his hand jerked. He lifted the shotgun and fired. The blast ripped through the fog like thunder, tearing into brush and air. But I was already gone, sliding left, moving on reflex. Every step balanced. Controlled. The kind of motion you don't forget, no matter how many years pass. My pistol came up smooth. No panic. Just precision. The first shot hit his shoulder. Second, his thigh. The third, low and clean, ended it before he could crawl away. He dropped hard. Folded sideways into the mud with a guttural cry that faded into a wheezing gasp. The shotgun spun from his hands and landed just inches from the lake's edge. The shotgun spun once before landing in the reeds. I walked toward him, each step slow, deliberate. No fear, no rush, just the steady sound of my boots pressing into the wet earth. In the background, the lake whispered against the rocks. Travis was breathing hard now, leaning on one elbow. His eyes were wide, frantic. "You're not the law," he growled. "You don't have the right." I didn't say a word. I grabbed his collar and pulled. His body slid through the dirt like dead weight, his limbs flopping like snapped branches. The fog crept in behind us, thick and heavy, as I dragged him toward the water. Right to the same spot where, just days earlier, my son's stroller had vanished beneath the surface. The lake sat still, calm, flat, like it was holding its breath. I stopped at the edge and stared out across the water. Then I looked down at him. Travis's voice cracked now. Please don't do this." I crouched slowly, leaned in just enough for him to hear every syllable. "You threw my kid into this lake," I said, voice low, steady. Didn't even hesitate. No thought. No pause. Just gone. His breathing caught. I didn't yell. Didn't shake. That kind of fury had passed. "This isn't revenge," I whispered. "This is clarity." He tried to grab at my sleeve, weak, desperate. I didn't move. "You wanted him to drown," I said. "And you called it enforcement. You saw a baby and decided he was a violation." I paused just for a second. "Now you're going to feel what he felt." With one hand, I dragged him closer, just a foot, until the cold lake water touched his legs. He let out a whimper. But I didn't throw him in. I didn't need to. I just stood there. Not to hurt him, but to show him. To make him feel it. To let him understand what it's like when fear replaces power. The same fear Mason must have felt, alone, in the cold, surrounded by silence. Travis didn't need to sink. He already had. In every way that mattered. I stood there at the lake's edge, the fog curling around my legs, the steel of my pistol still warm in my hand. He lay at my feet, shivering, not from the temperature, but from the realization that his little kingdom had finally crumbled. I watched him, quiet, focused. The only sounds were the water tapping against the rocks, and his broken, uneven breathing. He wasn't the HOA officer anymore. No fake badge. No clipboard. Just a man in the mud, wounded, scared, waiting on a sentence he didn't get to write. And I didn't cross the line. I didn't finish it. Instead, I reached into my jacket, pulled out my phone and called. 911, "What's your emergency?" the dispatcher asked. My voice stayed calm. "I've neutralized an armed suspect. He's down but alive. I need police and EMS at Lakeshore Trail." I gave them the coordinates. Nothing more. Then I ended the call. I didn't move. Just stood there, pistol in hand, not raised, not pointed. Just held. Like a tool that had done its job. Nothing more. Travis tried to shift, crawl an inch or two, but his body betrayed him. The wounds slowed him, humbled him. He finally got a taste of what others had felt, the helplessness, the fear, the vulnerability. I didn't offer him comfort. I offered him truth. "You knew I'd come," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Travis coughed, his lips shaking. "Why you were supposed to stop." "Weak," he said. "I was," I replied. Then, in the distance, sirens began to rise, soft at first, then winding their way through the trees like the last line of a story already written. Red and blue lights finally pierced the fog, flickering across the surface of the lake like ghosts dancing over water. Tires crunched against gravel. Doors slammed. "Hands in the air," came the command, sharp and clear, from a deputy, his boots hitting the shoreline fast. I turned to face them slowly. I set the Glock down gently, raised both hands, and stepped back from Travis. "I'm not resisting," I said. "Weapons on the ground. The suspect is down, he was armed. He's alive. For now." They moved in quick. 2 officers covered me. One went to check on Travis. Another collected my firearm. No one shouted. No chaos. Just clean, smooth action, exactly like how I'd done it. Travis let out a weak cry as a deputy rolled him onto his side and cuffed his wrists. "You can't let him get away with this," Travis yelled, his voice raw. "He's a soldier. He's supposed to protect people. That's what they do." I didn't flinch. One of the officers glanced at me, unsure what to make of what he'd just heard. But I met Travis's gaze dead on. "So, I did protect," I said. "Just not you." Those words hung in the air, heavier than the mist, louder than the sirens. And just like that, it was over. No one cheered. No crowd clapped. No dramatic speeches. I just watched as they lifted him onto a stretcher, his voice growing softer, more desperate, until it was finally drowned out by the hum of the engine. Then I turned, looked back out over the lake. The water was still again. And for the first time since that nightmare morning, I let myself breathe. A gavel struck once. Then silence. Travis Dean was sentenced to 45 years in federal prison. No parole. No reduced time. No second chances. The courtroom didn't erupt in applause. There were no gasps. Just a quiet release, like a whole town finally letting go of a breath it hadn't realized it was holding. The man who had patrolled our streets with fake authority, who turned paranoia into a weapon, was finally gone. The charges? Attempted murder of a child. Kidnapping. Impersonating a law officer. Harassment. Illegal surveillance. Breaking and entering. Abuse of authority. But in the end, none of those labels mattered as much as this. He had been stopped. And he would never hurt another neighbor again. I didn't say a word the entire sentencing. Just sat there quiet. Rachel sat beside me, holding Mason close. He was asleep in her arms, soft, peaceful, unaware that this moment, this quiet hour inside a courthouse, was the final page of something that almost took him away forever. Outside, reporters waited. Cameras flashed. Microphones reached out like fishing poles. I walked straight past them. I didn't say anything. That story didn't belong to them. It belonged to the people of Clearwater Hills. And they were just starting to take it back. What followed was something rare. Change. Inspired by everything that had happened, almost every single resident in our HOA zone showed up to the emergency community meeting 2 weeks later. Not to shout. Not to fight. But to reclaim what had been twisted. They came with photos, records, complaints, stories they'd never felt safe sharing before. Everything they'd kept hidden, they brought into the light. And what it revealed was worse than most had imagined. Travis's grip had been slow, steady, and far-reaching. Fake warnings. Unauthorized inspections. Flashlights in windows at night. All those so-called security checks Travis had done? Turned out they were just a cover. The truth came out fast. Either the HOA board had looked the other way, or they'd never really checked his credentials at all. Whichever it was, trust had been shattered. Next came the lawsuit, a class action. People weren't just after justice for what Travis Dean had done. They wanted answers. Accountability. From everyone who let it happen. Investigators dug deep. Board records, financial files, hiring paperwork, nothing was off limits. What they uncovered led to a full-blown legal audit. And within a few months, the entire HOA board was dissolved. A new one was formed, elected by the neighborhood, run out in the open, no more secrecy. This time, the board was made up of veterans, teachers, parents, folks who knew what balance looked like. Balance between order and freedom. Between safety and fear. They offered me a spot on that board. I turned it down. I didn't need power. What I had now was peace. And that peace came to life each morning, right where everything had nearly fallen apart. Just after sunrise, I'd take that same quiet path behind the houses, through the trees, until it opened wide at the shoreline. I'd carry Mason in my arms, sometimes dozing off, sometimes wide-eyed and blinking at the sky. Week by week, he was growing stronger. His laugh was back. His breath didn't shake anymore. We'd stop at the water's edge. The mist there felt different now, softer. The lake calmer. I'd kneel down, hold him close, and point out over the water. "That's where you almost didn't get to see the world," I'd whisper. "But you did, because you're stronger than what tried to take you." He'd gurgle, blink, and sometimes reach up, wrapping those tiny fingers around my thumb. And I'd smile. "You're stronger than death, buddy," I'd say. "And I'm stronger than fear." That became my morning ritual. Not for revenge. Not even for memory. But for gratitude. Not a single day went by that I didn't think about how close I came to losing it all. But these days, I don't carry a weapon. I carry my son. I don't watch my 6 anymore. I watch the sunrise. I haven't forgotten who I used to be. I've just chosen a different kind of mission now. And somehow, in that quiet choice, I found more strength than any battlefield ever gave me. The lake stayed still. But me? Like that morning light breaking over the horizon, I kept rising.